We have a respected
Nous avons permis aux députés de venir à la session du comité. On a maintenant le quorum. J'ouvre maintenant la séance numéro 24 du comité permanent des ressources humaines, du développement des compétences, du développement social et de la condition des personnes handicapées. Nous allons entendre les témoins sur le projet de loi C15 pendant 1h45 minutes à peu près, puis nous nous réunirons à huis clos pendant 15 minutes pour examiner le projet de rapport sur les travailleurs de l'industrie saisonnière, le régime d'assurance emploi. La réunion d'aujourd'hui se déroule dans un format hybride conformément au règlement. Les membres assistent à la réunion en personne dans la salle et à distance à l'aide de l'application Zoom. Avant de commencer, je demanderai à tous les participants présents en personne de consulter les directives, mais aussi de mettre le téléphone sous silence, d'éviter de taper sur les micros parce que ça peut créer des incidents acoustiques. Vous pouvez écouter.
Okay, I've got to spin for a moment because the interpreters are, there's an issue, so I'll spin for a moment. Apologies, but we cannot proceed without translation. So at that, I was reminding those appearing virtually to click on the globe icon at the bottom of your surface and choose the official language you wish to participate in. If there's an interruption in translation services, please get my attention and we'll suspend, as we just did a moment ago, for it to be corrected. As well, please, all questions and comments should be addressed through I, the chair. Before I introduce the panel for the first hour, I do have an item. All members have been circulated the budget that we need approved to conduct this study that we're now just about completed. Do we have approval of the $46,200? All members, I was advised it was circulated to all members. It's the budget. Yeah, it's for your lunch. It was circulated to all members last week. It's $46,200. Do we have approval of this budget? It is the last day. I need approval. Consent? Consent. Thank you, members. The budget is approved, Madam Clerk. Thank you. With that, we'll move to the first panel. I'd like to welcome our guest, Breakfast Club of Canada, Judith Barry, co-founder, Director of Governmental Relations. From the Coalition of Healthy School Food, we have Carolyn Webb, Knowledge Mobilization Coordinator. And appearing on screen, we have Dylan Kirk by video conference, Council of Traditional Chinese Medicine and Acupuncture Schools of Ontario. Each organization has 5 minutes for your opening remarks, so I will begin with Ms. Barry. Ms. Barry, you have up to 5 minutes, please.
Bonjour, hi, dear members of HUMA committee. I'm really happy to be here today. I'll express myself in French mainly, but please know that I can answer any questions in French or English right after. Alors, près de 2 ans.
About 2 years after the announcement of the first investment in the National School Food Program, the federal government included a legislative measure, Division 44, 549, in Bill C-15 to make the program permanent and provide $260 million per year. The Breakfast Club and many other partners welcomed the news, and specifically the club submitted a document recommending the adoption of Bill C-15 in order to ensure sustainable funding and allowing students and their families, regardless of challenges in political leadership or fiscal cycles. In order to support this recommendation, the Breakfast Club included in its submission new information from a cost analysis done by APECO agency. It says that for each dollar invested in school food programs, $2 of benefit, if you will, is generated in terms of socio-economic benefits. So we can talk about 3 concrete impacts. For instance, an increase in families' disposable income and better school attendance levels, and thirdly, a reduction in healthcare expenditure. So we thought that it was important to encourage the federal government to index its investment to inflation and also to invest in infrastructure and local supplies, the provision of local supplies. In our submission, we also asked the government to recognize the National School Food Program as a multidimensional program by its nature, which requires coordinated actions and mechanisms across government levels and departments, including formal ways to engage civil society organizations and food industry partners. According to the Center of Excellency in Brazil, it is very important to have mechanisms in place to coordinate these efforts so that all partners are equally involved. And part of the process should be about evaluating the implementation of the program and the participation of the food industry partners so that we are creating efficiencies and productivity and having a long-term impact on food systems. So for all these reasons, we do recommend the adoption of Bill C-15, and let us I'll be happy rather to answer all of your questions if you have any.
Barry, now Ms. Webb for 5 minutes or less, please.
Great. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and the committee, for inviting me to speak today. The Coalition for Healthy School Food is a network made up of more than 380 nonprofit member organizations and over 150 endorsing organizations from all provinces and territories. We've been advocating for a cost-shared national school food program for over a decade. We were very pleased when Canada joined the rest of the G7 by introducing the National School Food Policy and signing bilateral agreements with all provinces and territories. We celebrate the tabling of the National School Food Program Act, as we've been communicating that we'd like Canada to follow this best practice seen in other countries. A recent World Food Program report stated that all the evidence shows that school meal programs are one of the smartest long-term investments any government can make. Cette loi est importante pour les Canadiens. Le programme national.
This legislation is important for Canadians. The program aims to standardize the rules of the game and allow children and young people across the country to be well-fed and ready to have a real chance, an equal chance to succeed. This program also helps parents, especially women, by reducing stress and the time they need to spend preparing lunches and other food items for the children. And we are also looking at an increase in the contribution of the program from $2,600 to $3,800.
Affordability crisis, and the National School Food Program has emerged as an important tool to help families with cost of living pressures. Our vision is that this program will support all families and all children over time, which the legislation is committed to, and we hope that this is a first step in addressing this issue together. As you think about how to continue helping families with affordability pressures, we hope that all parties and all members will appreciate that building out the National School Food Program is a ready-made tool that will have a real impact. In continuing to look at school food program benefits, intentionally designed programs can create a market for regionally grown food, grow local food economies, and support communities. You and your colleagues can allocate funding to the Buy Canadian in School Food Programs concept that was proposed in the April 2025 Liberal Platform Costing Plan. And the 2025 Eat Lancet Commission also speaks about the strong potential of sustainable school meal policies to promote climate resilience, as well as more sustainable and equitable food systems. These benefits can all be realized through the excellent national school food policy that supports the Act. Specifically, the policy's principles are that programs are accessible without stigma or barriers, health promoting, where food is nutritious and consistent with Canada's Food Guide, and where children and youth develop healthful behaviors, attitudes, knowledge, and skills. Inclusive, providing culturally appropriate food and engaging students in the broader community. Flexible, where food is locally sourced where possible and reflective of local and regional circumstances. Environmentally sustainable and adequately resourced, and accountable with consistent and transparent monitoring and evaluation to make sure that programs achieve policy objectives.
Given the importance and potential of school food programs, we are very pleased that this program is being enshrined in the legislation. This will enable programs across the country to benefit from stable funding, allowing them to implement programs in a gradual and planned manner. I also would like to share our 3 recommendations. First, for you and your colleagues, we'd like you to adopt the National School Food Program Act as quickly as possible.
We want to see the full potential of the policy's vision and principles realized. And so we'd like to see strong mechanisms put in place for the Government of Canada to continually and incrementally work towards, monitor, and report on the comprehensive implementation of the policy's vision, each of the principles, and the objectives in collaboration with the provinces, territories, and Indigenous governing bodies. And third, that the government promotes the National School Food Policy in all public communications of the Act to ensure that the policy's details are recognized and understood. We urge you to pass the National School Food Program Act into legislation and then to continue to build the program, including increasing your investment and working to ensure greater provincial and territorial involvement so that there's true equity of access. It's critical that these programs be adequately funded so that all children and youth can be nourished at school, as food affordability remains a top issue for families. And we look forward to continuing this conversation with you and working to achieve the full potential of this program. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Webb. Now, Mr. Kirk for 5 minutes or less.
Mr. Chair, Vice Chairs, and members of the committee. Speak on behalf of our profession and our students. My name is Dylan Kirk. I'm here today as the president of the Council of Traditional Chinese Medicine and Acupuncture Schools of Ontario, representing the institutions that train the majority of this workforce in our TCM, and the academic dean at the Ontario College of TCM, which has been operating since 1998. We take immense pride in running excellent, high-standard education programs. 700 registered acupuncturists, TCM practitioners, or doctors of TCM who offer affordable healthcare, relieving pressure on our public health system.
Excuse me, Mr. Kirk, for a moment. We're losing sound with you. I will have to suspend for a moment while we're getting it checked out. We'll suspend. ask you to pick up at the part of your speech where we had went into suspension, if that's clear to you.
Order, Mr. Chair. I would just ask if we could consider having him start from the beginning because parts of it weren't included and therefore weren't translated.
That's fine with me, but it's okay. Mr. Kirk, if you want to start from the top, it's fine.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for this opportunity. My name is Dylan Kirk. I am.
Excuse me, Mr. Kirk, there's still an issue. At this time, we're going to have to proceed with the meeting, but I'm going to ask you to stay online, and the technical people will be in touch with you to see what we can correct with it. But with that, we have to suspend your comments, Mr. Kirk. I conclude those. We'll now go to the first round of questioning. Yeah. Okay, we will go with the first 6-minute round of questioning, beginning with Ms. Goodrich for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank our witnesses for being here today to discuss this important topic. And both of you guys highlighted on the fact that we are in a cost of living crisis, and I know being a mom to young kids, I talk to parents all the time that are struggling. They're struggling to be able to provide the food that they were able to provide just last year. And so programs like what both of you guys have been delivering for many years has been so positive. But one of the pieces when I first started looking into this that I decided to reach out to was to school principals to see what kind of administrative burden this was putting on them. And many of them actually shared that there was an enormous amount of administrative burden. And I was just wondering if you could dictate to us, and perhaps we could start with Ms. Barry and go to you, Ms. Webb, what kind of administrative burden has this assistance added to your program?
On our side at Breakfast Club of Canada, we are not involved with the deployment of the federal investment within all provinces and territories. But as far as we understand, there's reporting and data that is needed for the federal government and for provinces and territories relating to the outcomes that they have committed to deliver. Of course, if some strong mechanism to coordinate and monitor the results would be in place, it would help all sectors to align and streamline the reporting.
Well, and I know in reading through your guys' reports that you've released, you've been able to quantify what the costs are in Quebec, but you can't actually quantify what the costs are in other provinces and territories because there is no streamlined system of data collection. And so I know in the school administrators I've talked to, they already have a lot on their plate. And the federal government has given them this, and they know that it is important. They know that it is important to make sure that kids are fed and that they do better in school when they are fed, but they don't have the means to be able to actually implement the program as well as possible because they don't have the experience as an organization like either of you guys do in actually making sure kids get fed. So I guess one question I have is, how many kids do you feed a year through your breakfast club, Ms. Barry?
With Breakfast Club of Canada, in collaboration with many school districts and regional organizations, we're reaching over 800,000 students currently. And we know that in some provinces...
And how much money does that... So you feed over 800,000 kids a year.
On a daily basis.
On a daily basis. Mm-hmm. And how much money is that?
That's a budget, a yearly budget of over 50 million.
50?
Yeah.
So this federal government is wanting to feed 400,000 kids with 216 million annually. Do you think you could feed more kids better than that?
Actually, I think all stakeholders are needed, and we were really happy 2 years ago that finally the federal government is part of the solution. We were the only G7 country without a national school food program. So the federal investment is needed. The way that is their impact is associated with that 400,000 students is a way that we can look at it, but we can look at universal reach, because that's the vision of the National School Food Policy.
I appreciate that. Who is responsible in Canada for education primarily?
Of course, you know that this is provinces and territories, yeah.
And
that's why we need to build on their existing programming.
And I think this is one of the pieces where I have concerns. I came from a provincial background, and I think that my province, I know for a fact my province has had a school food program for many, many years, and they have been working collaboratively, and they've actually worked fairly collaboratively with the federal government in trying to roll this out. But I know other provinces didn't necessarily have that framework in place and have been put into a bit of a challenge space. So I guess over to you, Ms. Webb. What kind of administrative burden have you guys heard of from other partners when it comes to this new national school food program that the government rolled out?
Yeah, as Ms. Berry spoke to, there are sorry, my thought just went away. But in terms of, we haven't heard from any about the administrative burdens. My understanding is the provincial and provinces and territories are responsible for enhancing the programs that they already have. And so for them, I think the new addition is the reporting requirements from the federal government. And so I can see how that will add certainly to the administrative burden. Hopefully, though, as Ms. Berry spoke to, we can work towards, we can see this as growing pains and things that we can improve on to streamline, to coordinate that monitoring and really figure out some good systems, including even what are we all monitoring together, like some of those common indicators that we can do, as well as some of my colleagues at the University of Saskatchewan have been developing some tools that can be used to support some of that monitoring. And so I think as all these tools and platforms are developed, we can.
Could you speak a little bit to that? Because I have read quite a bit about what the University of Saskatchewan's doing, and I think it's absolutely spectacular, and perhaps you could share a little bit about that amazing prairie ingenuity.
Yeah, absolutely. They've received some...
Quick answer, your time is up. Quick response.
Oh, yeah, just some tools to support monitoring and evaluation, as well as how programs can be run, different models. But the tools are really, if you're looking to monitor this, here are some good questions, and we can certainly send information to anyone who's interested. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Goodrich. Ms. Fancy for 6 minutes.
Afternoon. Oh, there we go. Thank you very much for being here, Ms. Berry and Ms. Webb today. So I'm speaking today as a former administrator and teacher and talking a little bit about just how this program has been quite transformational in terms of education. So I know my colleague across the way just talked about administrative burden. Ask me, because I was in the thick of this as being an educator from Nova Scotia. We were one of the first national adopters. And my school board in particular, South Shore Regional Centre for Education, was actually the national template. So when we talk about implementing this program in the early beginnings, was it a lot of work and was there some burden? Yes, but that's why we always have a good lesson learned document. And the benefits to this program, and once we've worked out some of the kinks over the last year or so, have been tremendous. I've got a couple questions for both of you today. The first one is, as a former educator and principal in schools across my riding of South Shore St. Margaret's, I saw firsthand that hungry kids struggle to focus and participate. So from your experience, and this question will be for Ms. Berry first, how do you feel that school food programs directly support learning and classroom engagement? I know I could go on forever, but you're here as our witness today. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your question. After more than 30 years of supporting the quality school breakfast program implementation, Breakfast Club of Canada have seen tremendous impacts and stories of change, right? In some regions, there is school principal who told us that if the next school year wouldn't be still supported by Breakfast Club of Canada, they would close their their door because they had so many behavioral issues to deal with before the implementation of the program. And in terms of learnings, they couldn't teach at all, right? So, of course, it has a tremendous impact, and there's a lot of studies that are providing evidence on learnings, on health, and on the ability for the students to create and build healthy relationships amongst themselves.
That's wonderful. As also a rural education researcher, we did a lot of work with the EDI reports, or early developmental indicators, back decades ago, and they were calling on governments to create larger food programs. So having this national food program has been one of the indicators of vulnerability that the EDI reports had really been speaking for. I'm from a rural and coastal community. Schools here, they often face some very unique challenges around access, but also capacity. How can the National School Food Program help the investments to ensure that rural kids aren't left behind? And this question is for Ms. Webb. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I would say, again, all of these are growing pains. As you talked about, Nova Scotia is an early adopter, and it's been really interesting hearing about the program come into place and be grown. And so I think that that's one of the beautiful things and challenging things is that there are schools in every region of Canada, and it really is a matter of partnerships, I believe, and figuring out those distribution chains. We know that last mile is often one of the most challenging, and especially for rural and remote communities. In conversation with our Indigenous partners, they were particularly highlighting and may submit a brief about the unique challenges for Indigenous communities and how very often they're small and need just as many resources, if not more, to get the food provided there. And so really wanted to highlight that equitable programming and funding. And so I appreciate that I can speak to that today. In terms of solutions, it's a matter of really working with the experts in the field, the folks who know those distribution chains, and talking to somebody at the Ontario Fruit and Vegetable Growers Association who manages their Northern Fruit and Vegetable Program in Ontario. They've mapped out all these supply chains and now can distribute snacks in a pretty coordinated way to many rural communities. So I think it's just tapping into those experts who have been doing this and working with all sorts of partners to try to make this happen.
So I love it that we're talking about nutrition here too, right, and healthy food. My next question is still for Ms. Webb. How do school nutrition programs support not just children, but also working families who are managing or trying to manage with the rising cost of food?
Yeah, the wonderful thing about school food programs is that, the aim is to bring nutritious food into a school setting that children can learn together, connect with each other, and also expand their palates. Now, that is another growing pain because our food culture is often not one that has many of the foods, and so part of the program is helping gain that recognition and all of that. In terms of families, these programs can significantly lower grocery bills for families and make it so that children and youth are exposed to more different foods that they can have kind of those habits for a lifetime of healthy eating, we say.
Nice. And very quickly, in my last question for Ms. Webb, you talked a little bit earlier about the 1-to-2 ratio of beneficial economic value. So I was wondering if you could expand upon that a little bit. Thank you. Oh, it was Miss Berry. I'm looking at Miss Berry. Sorry, Miss Berry.
I saw that you were looking at me. It's all good. So it has been amazing across the globe to see World Food Program and many other stakeholders demonstrating the impact of school meal in terms of return on investment. So we thought it would be important as Canada is implementing its first national school food program to specifically know about Canadian breakfast programs. So it was for one.
Sorry, I wasn't watching.
Sorry.
We're over.
I'm so sorry.
My bad. Madame, you had got extra too. Madame Laroche pour 6 minutes. S'il vous plaît.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I would like to thank all three witnesses for being with us today. Dylan Kirk, Carolyn Webb, and Judith Barry. My first question will be for Miss Barry. In Quebec, we have understood the importance of this issue. We have the very young children at daycare, for instance, who are receiving nutrition, and it gives them a lot of energy in kindergartens and in schools. I've had some experience working at schools, primary schools specifically, and we always at the time needed people to take care of the children when it was time to have food, when it was lunchtime. It was a very enriching experience. And schools were trying to follow in the footsteps of kindergartens in Quebec, because some of the youngest children didn't really have much in their lunch boxes. There was real inequality in that sense. Some almost had nothing in their lunch boxes sometimes, and we know that this has an impact on their behavior, on their learning capacity. It really was striking to see. And when I got elected, and after I started in this field, I remember, Miss Barry, that we had the chance to work on this file. I visited 2 schools, one in Granby. So I was able to see volunteers working with kids, distributing food. That, again, was a valuable experience. And I realized the importance of this kind of support that is available to young people, to children. And during the last Parliament, you had exchanges with my colleague Sylvie Berube, and you again exchanged about this program. So my question touches on the importance of becoming aware of the stakes here. And Quebec has its own school food support program. So the question is, how can the federal program support initiatives that already exist without creating duplication and interfering? So how could that collaboration work? Thank you very much, Ms. Larouche. I think this is an extremely important question, because the federal government's intention, as mentioned by Ms. Goodridge, comes with an emphasis on education and on continuity. So it's important for the federal government to continue to respect the jurisdiction of the provinces. And the federal government should just come in to build upon and improve on the existing structures that we have at different schools at different parts of the country. So that should indeed be the objective of the National Food Program, to make sure that the whole system remains coherent and the entirety of our society has a mechanism, a tool via which we can eventually allow all students across the country to have access to healthy food at one point or another of their learning journey, whenever they need it for whatever they might need it. So the objective should be and is to build this ecosystem of collaborators at different levels of government, but also with participation from civil society organizations and the agri-food industry partners. So there are a lot of stakeholders, like busy bees, coming together to, and it's quite enriching to see that at schools during lunchtime as well. Do you think that the federal government's participation or support is it sufficiently predictable to ensure the longevity of this program? We absolutely need the federal government's investment to be indexed to inflation. So, for instance, if you have universal participation to reach all students across the country, we are looking at $15 per student per day that needs to be provided from the federal government, whereas the provinces and territories are investing currently $40 per student per child per day. So when you talk about the cost of a breakfast or a lunch, of course, the funding that's out there on the table as we speak is not sufficient. So what kind of mechanisms could be deployed to make sure that this sustainability is ensured? You touched upon this briefly in your opening remarks. When we talk about coordination mechanisms, there are roundtables where all stakeholders from industry as well are represented. This way, everyone is working in the same direction, and we are also trying to make sure that we don't have duplication in terms of investing resources. We need complementarity rather than duplication. And local supply is an important aspect of this, and this is not possible. You can't achieve it, this objective particularly, without having collaboration and without having a common objective. That's really what we want. We want to build this type of a mechanism. This could be a national advisory council, and then at the level of the different regions, we could have committees. Thank you, Mr. Arush.
Oh, okay. Mr. Jenis for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the witnesses. I want to probe this issue of the federal government's involvement in these programs. I understand why people involved in delivering these programs would love to see more money from the federal government, but I'm talking specifically about kind of administrative involvement in the programs. The federal government is not involved in the delivery of education. They're not involved in decisions about running schools, laying out schools, the kind of curriculum. And I could see why people might want to make the case for saying increase transfers to provincial governments, to school boards for programs they delivered. I could see why people involved in this kind of work would want to make that argument. But I don't really understand why it would be desirable to have the federal government involved in specifically the administration of these kinds of programs, things like monitoring, evaluation, decision-making. Aren't these the sorts of things that are best left to decision-making at the local level?
I can start with that. Since we were established over the past 10 years, we've been speaking to this as a health intervention for kids that takes place in the school setting, because we know that the health benefits are so rich for physical and mental health for our children and youth. And in terms of making sure that programs are monitored, it is so valuable to understand what the impacts of these programs are to be able to grow them. And then in terms of how...
I'm sorry, I'll give you the floor back,
Yeah.
but just, I mean, it happens in an education setting. You've described it as a health intervention.
Yeah.
But even health interventions are administered at the provincial level typically. It's not obvious to me why, as an education or a health intervention or both, the federal government directing aspects of implementation makes any sense when you have school boards that are present, that are engaged in activities that are designed to benefit the health as well as the education of students. These programs could be supported through an increase to provincial transfers in general. Why specifically does having public servants in Ottawa involved in reviewing, directing, on top of what's happening at other levels, how does that make the system any better?
Yeah, my understanding is that the federal money is given to provinces and territories to use to implement and supplement their own programs, and that it can be used in a way that they deem best. And so that the big question about civil servants in Ottawa, my understanding is that the monitoring and evaluation is really to see the impact from the federal perspective. But yeah, it is, I think, was designed so that the provinces and territories could do whatever seemed most relevant to their context and situation.
Okay, so is the program just an increase in transfer to the provinces, or does it involve hiring additional people here in Ottawa to make decisions about what interventions should and should not be supported?
That question shouldn't be for us, I'm sorry, but I think it should be.
Well, I'm just asking how the program works from your perspective, though.
Yeah, I mean, I can share my understanding is that the money is mostly transferred to provinces and territories, and I don't know about hires within the federal
Do you think it
government
would be better if it was just all transferred to the provinces and territories?
here.
Like zero money spent on hiring new public servants and all of the money spent on transfers to the people who are already doing it on the front lines. Would that be a better system?
I think what's important to remind ourselves is that we believe that this is a multidimensional program by nature, and we need all sectors and all stakeholders to be much more involved, because you are right, there is clearly
okay, sorry, I am just running out of time, and I will give it back to you, but I guess I still don't really understand what having an additional group of public servants in Ottawa reviewing and sending direction, suggestions to people in my riding who are already delivering these programs, like how in the world does that improve the effectiveness?
What we think would improve the efficiency is to gather the stakeholders and ensure that there is some mechanism in place to monitor and really support efficient, impactful programming. And we believe that civil society can help that.
So why doesn't civil society can do it then? But this is a question about the federal government's involvement, right? Okay, thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Jeunesse. Madame Katrakis for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for appearing here today, and thank you for your important testimony on this very important subject matter. I think everyone around this table, regardless of party stripe, will agree that sending children to school in the morning hungry is not the way that this G7 country should be looking after its young. And if we want young talent and bright talent to continue in this country, I think it's the responsibility of all levels of government to ensure that the funding is there to make sure we have a program such as the National School Food Program. Beyond the direct benefits for children, what evidence or experience have you seen regarding the broader economic benefits of school food programs, particularly their impact on household purchasing power, such as reducing food costs for families, as well as benefits for communities and public systems more generally? Either one of you.
Would you like to?
I think that one of the, I can speak to what I have heard about the school food programs, not necessarily for families, but in terms of a system, it increases the bulk purchasing power of those schools and those programs to really support more food to be purchased for each dollar. And so it is, you can say that it's more efficient for purchasing food, which does relieve the costs on families themselves. I'm not sure if that addresses the point that you're trying to make, but yeah, we've certainly heard the efficiency, and it's pretty amazing what some folks are doing. There's a program in Maskwacis, Alberta community where they've bought an apple orchard or half an apple orchard or something, and are shipping the apples and have cold store systems and are really supporting those local farmers and systems. And that because again, you have the bulk. And I guess my back of the napkin calculation says that about 7% of meals, I might be wrong, but are eaten in schools. That is a lot of purchasing power. So it's pretty exciting. We're going to kind of put a plea to everybody here. Think what we can do with that. It's pretty wonderful to support our local economies, our local producers, and really bring that to kids and help them understand those connections.
Thank you so much for this. And based on this answer, Mr. Chair, I would like to move the following motion. That pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee undertake a study on the implementation and long-term permanence of the National School Food Program as made permanent and funded in Budget 2025, that the study examine the design, governance, and delivery of the program, including the division of roles and responsibilities between the federal, provincial, and territorial governments, the funding model and metrics used to measure outcomes, efficiency, and long-term sustainability, and the mechanisms for ensuring transparency and accountability, that the study explore the impact of program permanence on achieving equitable access to nutritious, culturally appropriate food in schools across Canada, with particular attention to children in low-income, Indigenous, Northern, rural, and remote communities, that witnesses include, but not be limited to, representatives from the Coalition for Healthy School Food, Breakfast Club of Canada, La Table des Chefs, Indigenous organizations, and public health and nutrition experts, that the committee devote a minimum of 8 meetings to this study, and that the committee report its findings and recommendations to the House, and that pursuant to Standing Order 109, the committee requests that the government table a comprehensive response to the report. And Mr. Chair, we have also sent a copy to the clerk in both official languages.
Just for a clarification before you get, are you moving it to notice or moving it for debate? Are you simply putting it on notice to be followed up later?
I'm moving it for debate.
Okay. Mr. Janice?
Maybe this will be, possiblement ça va être un peu plus simple. We've got witnesses here. We've got witnesses in the second hour who are scheduled to talk about some important issues around traditional Chinese medicine. I understand we have committee business scheduled for the end of this meeting anyways. My colleague is fully within her rights procedurally to move this motion, and I'm also fully within my rights to move the following, in hopes that we'll be able to get back to hearing from witnesses and that the committee will be able to proceed as planned. I move that we adjourn debate on this motion.
Okay, we have...
Monsieur le Président, avant de voter, est-ce que je peux juste prendre...
Mr. Chair, can we take a couple minutes before we vote? Take a moment.
Madam, I do have a motion to adjourn debate, which is dilatory, that I have to dispense with. So there's a motion been moved to adjourn debate on the motion. Clerk, I must call a recorded vote, which would adjourn debate on the motion of Madame Koutrakis.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madame Desrochers.
No. The vote on the motion to adjourn.
No.
Debate on the motion.
Miss Fancy.
No.
Monsieur Joseph.
No.
Miss Koutrakis. No. Mr. Ho.
Yeah. Free vote.
Mr. Janice.
Yes.
Miss Goodridge.
Yes.
Mr. Reynolds.
Yes.
Madame Larouche.
Bon, puisqu'on n'a pas reçu, je vais répondre oui.
So five yeas, 4 nays.
So the debate on the motion is adjourned at the moment. That returns us to the questioning. And no, Madame Koutrakis, you had the floor to. You had the floor.
Moving her motion.
No, when you move the motion, it takes the time.
Okay.
Unless you want to concede it.
I have time to ask the question.
One question.
Okay. What are the main barriers you face in collecting consistent or comparable data, and how could governments help reduce those challenges while keeping the burden on schools manageable? We've heard from various testimony when I've had one-on-one meetings with various groups saying that collecting data is quite challenging. Are you able to speak to that?
At Breakfast Club of Canada, we would be happy to help bridge all the reporting requirements. We know that sometimes within the same school there is governmental data that is required, but there is other stakeholders that are supporting the same program because it takes a village to feed a child. So that's exactly why we feel that some coordinating mechanism are needed, and it would be easy to solve those type of concerns and issues and facilitate the lives of the school teams.
Just really to add that often, and I think I might have spoken to it before, that people don't even know what to report, or there's not consistency across the different jurisdictions and that. And so creating some of that, as Madame Barry spoke to, the consistency and bringing people together, and then those tools to be able to report back and that in that consistent way, I think would be really quite valuable, is what we've heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Madame Koutrakis. We will conclude with Madame LaRouche pour 2 minutes et 30. Madame.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank our witnesses once again for being with us today. I started talking about strengthening the mechanisms with you, Ms. Barry, and I'd like to give you the opportunity, Ms. Webb, because in your opening remarks, you also, that was one of your 3 recommendations, actually. You referred to solid mechanisms. Could you maybe elaborate on that, about what you meant exactly by solid mechanisms? Thank you very much. I don't have specific ideas about the exact mechanisms, but
I can be clear. Thank you. Right now, we know that there's specific program-wide monitoring on kind of number of students, number of meals, and those basics. And we're hoping that at some point it can be scaled up so that we can really look at, and it might not be with the reporting, more monitoring or research on how can we support more local food in schools? How can we support those connections to food literacy? How can we support the community economic growth? And really just look beyond some of the basic metrics to the long-term impacts of these programs.
Et toutes les deux, vous parlez d'un aspect.
you both talked about a local supply strategy so that agriculture stakeholders, local farmers rather, have a say. So I don't have a lot of time left, but if you want to dive deeper a little bit about on local supply. Well, there are studies that show that when you are intentional with regard to creating these connections and these synergies between local supply, so local agriculture and schools, it really does create opportunities to build more resilient food systems. So this is a good opportunity that we have.
We would certainly encourage federal encouragement of provincial and territorial targets for local procurement, although they won't all be the same because every place is different, and it's a lot more possible in some regions than others. But some of those targets, as well as policies, especially how school boards can support more policies. And so it might be some examples of different ways that this work can be done. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Madame LaRouche. Madame Delroche?
Yeah, Chair, if I could have the floor very brief before we suspend. So as we heard from the speaker, this National School Food Program is
Point of order, Chair. There's an order to the round.
The opposition is refusing.
Is she able to ask a question?
It's a point of order.
No, you can't move anything on a point of order.
Sorry, she wasn't. I didn't hear that she was moving anything, but
When she identified a point of order, I'll have to hear it.
What I was saying, Mr. Chair, is we've heard from the witnesses today how important it is, and yet the Conservatives and the Bloc are refusing to debate a motion that would make the school food program
permanent. Chair, is this point of order?
Okay, thank you, Madame Delroche.
Madame Desroches.
Ms. Desroches, it's not that we don't want to talk about it. We just want to take a look at the motion. It was just put on our lap. We did not have 48 hours. We didn't have the time to study it. We just wanted to study it.
Merci. No, I want to advise the committee, the first hour is concluded. We were able to move Mr. Kirk to the second hour, and I've been advised that he was successfully tested. So with that, we will suspend while we transition to the second hour. Suspend. committee members, we are back in session for the second panel, and I would like to welcome in the committee room, we have Ms. Juman, the Executive Director of the Canadian Alliance of Students Association. Appearing virtually, we have Ms. Wu by video conference, Toronto School of Traditional Chinese Medicine. And then appearing again, we have Mr. Kirk, the Council of Traditional Chinese Medicine Acupuncture Schools of Canada. And actually, I'm going to begin with Mr. Kirk for 5 minutes. And Mr. Kirk, give your full opening 5-minute statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I hope that you can hear me clearly now. I will begin. Mr. Chair, Vice Chairs, and members of the committee, good afternoon, and thank you for this opportunity to speak on behalf of our profession and our students. My name is Dylan Kirk, and I'm here today as the president of the Council of Traditional Chinese Medicine and Acupuncture Schools of Ontario, representing the institutions that train the majority of this workforce in our province. I am also a practitioner of TCM and the academic dean at the Ontario College of TCM, which has been operating since 1998. We take immense pride in running excellent high-standard education programs. Our graduates join the approximately 7,700 registered acupuncturists, TCM practitioners, or doctors of TCM who offer affordable healthcare to millions of patients across Canada, relieving pressure on our public health system. I'm here to address a critical disconnect between the text of Bill C-15 and the government's stated policy direction in the budget. The 2025 federal budget explicitly stated an intention to remove Canada student grants for anyone attending private colleges. While Bill C-15 only mentions institutions outside Canada, the concern for domestic students remains. Our primary request to this committee is clear. We ask that Canada reconsider this action and continue supporting students in our programs, as has been done successfully for decades, to ensure that future talent can continue to serve the healthcare needs of Canadians. Private colleges are not competing with the public system. We are complementing it. We provide specialized high-level training capable of meeting the needs of students and the profession. In Ontario, there are 3 designations which we train: 3-year full-time or equivalent registered acupuncturist, 4-year full-time or equivalent registered TCM practitioner, and 5-year full-time or equivalent for the proposed Doctor of TCM designation. There are only 4 public colleges in all of Canada that offer TCM or acupuncture programs. Ontario has 1 TCM practitioner program. BC, Alberta, and Quebec each have 1 acupuncture program. By contrast, there are at least 25 private institutions delivering this training across the country. This is evidenced in Ontario, where in 2024, only 23 of the 248 candidates who wrote the Pan-Canadian examinations were from public colleges, while 225 were from private institutions. If you implement the budget's plan, you are effectively cutting off support for approximately 90% of the future workforce in this regulated health profession. It is unclear why the government would make this change, but we have heard it might relate to fraudulent activities by a small number of private career colleges. Meanwhile, we have been ethically administering student assistance on behalf of Canada and the provinces, and there has never been a hint of impropriety or inappropriate action in our sector. It makes no sense to punish the private colleges and all of our students because of the illegal actions of a few unethical operators. Our member institutions operate as private businesses with no subsidy from the government. Public institutions, in contrast, receive an estimated $8,000 to $12,000 of taxpayer money per seat. We rely entirely on tuition, and our students rely on a mix of grants and loans to afford that tuition. We are an asset to the Canadian economy and Canadian healthcare, not a liability. At OCTCM, nearly 80% of our 311 students receive financial assistance, including federal grant awards. Many of these students are upgrading skills or entering a second career. Federal and provincial awards are crucial for their ability to complete their education. If you replace these grants with loans, as the budget proposes, the effect will be one, that you will burden future healthcare practitioners with significantly higher debt just as they start their careers. Two, that students considering this career will not find it accessible. And three, that many TCM colleges across Canada will contract or cease operations. Mr. Chair, we have sent letters to both Minister Hadu and Provincial Minister Quinn detailing these risks. Today, we ask you to act. We recommend this committee report to the House that students in regulated healthcare programs must be exempt from any cuts to Canada student grants. We ask you to remove this threat from the federal agenda so we can continue training the healthcare workers Canada desperately needs. Thank you. I am ready for your questions.
Mr. Kirk, thank you for moving to the second panel. We'll now move to Ms. Juman for 5 minutes or less for your opening statement.
Perfect. Good afternoon, Honourable Chair, esteemed committee members, and fellow witnesses. I would like to begin my statement that I am joining today on the territory of the Anishinaabe Onglang Creek Nation. Thank you for the opportunity to appear today. I am here representing the Canadian Alliance of Student Association, CASA, and alongside our partner at l'Union Étudiante de Québec, I am speaking on behalf of more than 500,000 post-secondary students currently attending 40 public colleges, polytechnics, cégeps, and universities across Canada. Canada's Student Financial Aid Program supports over 700,000 Canadians annually via loans and grants. CASA is currently running a campaign pushing for the permanent increase in financial aid support for students. Students are sharing their realities of how, without adequate financial support, they will lose access to post-secondary education. A second-year student at the University of Alberta shares, and I quote, "A cut to the Canada Student Financial Aid Program will reduce my capacity to attend university and may cause me to have to leave school to work entry-level jobs for many years just to afford education." Please listen to the students all across Canada who will be affected by this. With the scarcity of jobs currently and low student worker wages, paying for school would be a lot more difficult and add on the stress of youth. I hope you will keep all of these students in mind, end quote. Our 2024 survey with Abacus data reports that even with the current levels of funding, students are struggling. 3% of domestic students experience homelessness and 36% skip meals because they cannot afford food. Over 28% of Canadian student financial aid recipients report unmet financial need, a figure projected to rise to 55% if annual grants are to decrease by 1,200 and weekly loans by 90, pricing out education for over 180,000 Canadians. Since the 2022 temporary expansion of the program at 4,200, domestic participation in post-secondary education increased by 6.7% among low and middle-income learners. Enrollment growth has been more pronounced among students from the lowest 40% of household income groups historically underrepresented in post-secondary education. In 2022-2023, 87% of Indigenous student beneficiaries received grants. This cut would hit hardest for low and middle-income students, students with disabilities, students with dependents, first-generation students, and Indigenous students. Last month, we asked Canadians, and 77% reported that they would see notable impact on their standard of living if their income were to drop $100 a week. Canadians understand the financial reality, with the majority saying they would oppose a cut to student financial aid. This is also reflected in a petition E-7090 currently before Parliament, which calls for a permanent expansion of the Canada Student Financial Aid Program to prevent support levels from reverting after July 2026. In less than 3 weeks, more than 2,500 Canadians have signed this petition, demonstrating that students and families are being loud and clear in communicating to the government that maintaining and strengthening student financial aid is essential to preserving access to post-secondary education across Canada. Canadians across the board are facing financial precarity. Now is not the time to cut aid, particularly for students who face the brunt of the affordability crisis. Just over the past year, students have faced sharp increases in costs across key areas, including rent up by 21.6%, living expenses up by 71.7%, and school-related costs up by 23.5%. Yet data shows that for every dollar spent in Canada's Student Financial Aid Program by the government, $1.64 is brought back to the Canadian economy. This committee's current study of the subject matter of Part 5, including Division 36 of Bill C-15, is directly consequential for students. Division 36 specifically engages amendment related to the Canada Student Financial Assistance Act, making this study a critical opportunity to ensure that any legislature or regulatory changes strengthen rather than weaken access and predictability of federal student aid. From the student policy perspective, we urge the committee to assess these measures through the lens of financial adequacy, unmet need, and long-term program sustainability. Federal student aid is not simply an expenditure line. It is a core labor, productivity, and social mobility instrument. As Parliament considers implementation measures flowing from the federal budget, it is essential that student financial assistance policy continues to reflect real-world cost pressures and preserve the federal government commitment to reducing financial barriers to post-secondary education and empowering the next generation. Education builds a nation, and students cannot build Canada's future if they are too busy fighting to afford the present. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Schumann. I would just remind presenters when they're speaking to slow it a bit for the translators who must translate for you. For the final presentation from Ms. Wu, 5 minutes or less. Madam Wu. You're muted. Yep. May have been your headset you clicked.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay now?
You have the floor, Madam Wu, 5 minutes or less.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members of HUMA. I deeply appreciate this opportunity to address the committee. I think now I just need to echo the previous two witnesses who have said everything so well, but I still like to take the floor and to express my appreciation and our concerns. So my name is Mary Xiumei Wu, and I'm the president of Toronto School of Traditional Chinese Medicine. Also, I was a medical doctor in China and a registered TCM practitioner and acupuncturist in Ontario here. So in China, I received 5 years medical school training, majored in traditional Chinese medicine, and was a medical doctor, researcher, as well as an educator back then at home since 1975. So if we calculate, it's been about 50 years already. And I came to Canada in 1986, completed my master's degree in biology, and was doing medical research in privileged organizations such as Banting and Bess Institute and also the Hospital for Sick Children in the field of reproduction, diabetes, and also gene therapy. So I have been advocate and play a leadership role in the regulation of traditional Chinese medicine profession, as well as the natural health products. So I have appeared in front of the committee a few times already. Today is so great that to be here again to talk about this very important topics here. So the purpose of my appearance today is that because we are deeply concerned about certain proposed budget measurements that are discriminatory and would negatively impact the vital work our institutions, our graduates, and our students will be doing or are doing. Well, I realize these measures are not yet implemented or contained within the Budget Implementation Act, but they do represent government policy intention and direct directly related to the issues of financial support discussed in this committee now. So we must address the policy intent now to prevent inequity. So on behalf of our students, their families, and our graduates, that we would request the committee to continuously to ensure the continuous financial support, especially the Canada Student Grant that is extended to all eligible full-time students, including our students that are attending private institutions. So with all of this, and I'm going to escape a few things and also not to elaborate on the importance, but just get to the end here, is that our request, we sincerely request that the committee reconsider the proposal of continue offering Canada Student Grant to our students. We're not asking for anything extra, really. We are just simply asking to be treated fairly, everything to be fair to the students who are attending public educational institutions and also to private educational institutions. Thank you.
Madam Wu, with that, we'll begin the first round of question with 6 minutes each. Mr. Jones? Mr. Jones, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much to our witnesses. Conservatives put forward in the fall our Conservative Youth Jobs Plan. And that included proposals to fix training, which focused on accessible training for students pursuing in-demand job. We recognize that there are some skill gaps in the economy. There are some areas where people with specific skills are needed. Excuse me. And there's not a sufficient number of people who have that training. Unfortunately, in response to these proposals, Liberals presented a budget that actually went in the opposite direction by proposing discrimination against students studying job-relevant programs at career colleges. These provisions were not in the BIA, but they were in the budget, and the Deputy Minister has reaffirmed that these remain government policy. And we've heard today specifically about the impacts that this would have on traditional Chinese medicine. And it seems strange to me that the government would take the position that any student studying any program at a university gets the full grant, regardless of the connection to employment or not, and that any student studying at a career college, regardless of the connection to employment or not, would not be eligible for that grant. It seems like a strange way to make this distinction when we have many in-demand skills, students preparing for very in-demand jobs at career colleges that would be cut off as a result of this policy. And traditional Chinese medicine is one example among many. Now, I did some events specifically on this issue with now Liberal MP Michael Ma, and I was hoping he would join us today, and he chose not to. But Michael Ma was very vocal previously on the issue of how these budget provisions would attack traditional Chinese medicine and the concerns he had reflecting his community. He actually called this systemic discrimination. He said that the budget provisions, as they related to traditional Chinese medicine and the impact on the Chinese community, amounted to systemic discrimination. So I'd like to ask the witnesses we have, particularly from the TCM community, if they would agree with Liberal MP Michael Ma's previous comments that the change proposed in the budget would qualify as systemic discrimination.
Well, we do feel that we are discriminated. In this case, actually, Michael was right. It was systematic, okay, yeah, and in that way because at the beginning, when we just started our program, we were just told that no, your students were not eligible for student financial assistance. You know what? It took us over 20 years to communicate with the government and to really work very, very hard with our students, our associations, and so on to request even the eligibility for anyone studying TCM and acupuncture in private institutions to get student assistance. So it took us over 20 years already. So this is one thing. Another thing is that we do not have any government funding. I mean, zero. And we all have to work by ourselves day and night. Sometimes people may say we are for profit, but we are really not for profit just because we do this because of our formal belief in this ancient medicine. And we believe this medicine could help everybody, including everyone in Canada here, significantly for their health promotion and for their disease prevention and treatments. Thirdly, is that we were not, our graduates, from private institutions were not allowed to get a working permit for international students, right? So that cut out a lot of other things, even for the past couple years, that we are not even allowed to have any international students. So in this way, we do agree.
Just to jump in, because I've got 1 minute left, and I appreciate the point you're making about how there's a link between this discrimination in this grant and access. I think you've made the point that there is effectively, because the vast majority of people are trained through these types of institutions that are where the grants would no longer be eligible, that it would have a significant impact on access. Mr. Kirk, if you can just, in the time we have left, comment on Mr. Ma's comments that this policy constitutes systemic discrimination. Was Mr. Ma right to say that this is systemic discrimination?
Yeah, we have faced an uphill battle in this profession and often face misunderstanding from regulators or other healthcare professions or policymakers. And part of that is why the majority of our educational system is private colleges. We do see the need to be flexible and adapt to the situation. So I agree with that statement, and we hope to continue to advocate for the profession and allow our students to access the same resources as those that decide to go to public colleges.
Madame de Rocher, for a minute.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Well, I will switch to English.
This is again a clear illustration of the Conservatives' plans. Actually, it's a clear illustration that the Conservatives have no plan other than obstructing everything that the government is putting forward. We have seen this earlier today with the National School Food Program. We are seeing it every day on affordability. We are seeing it on tough on crime legislation. They are saying, Mr. Chair, through you, we want to work together, and yet in committee we're blocking and misinterpreting.
Clearly state your point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is very clear that we cannot work collaboratively if we do not receive the motion in advance.
Goodrich, that is not a point of order. Madame de Rocher, you have to.
We're here today to discuss Bill C-15, and all of the elements I'm talking about, many of them are in Bill C-15. We are seeing every day in the House, Mr. Chair, right, questions about affordability, and yet when it comes time to supporting the initiatives that we are putting forward, like the National School Food Program, like the dental care plan, like child care benefits, the Conservatives stand up and vote no. So I am just, again, people have it today. Here we are discussing the Budget Implementation Act. We are discussing Bill C-15. And thank you very much, Ms. Jumun, for your testimony today. I hear your concern. I just want to say, what it is that we are putting forward, just to clarify. And I am hearing concerns, right? What we want to do is what we're after is students who attend private for-profit educational institution outside of Canada. We are not looking to claw back on programs in Canada, right? Unless the provincial government is making a recommendation that the institution does not necessarily provide the services that it should provide, right? So I think that we are here again in this world of let's build a big monster here, and the Liberals broke everything, right? In theory, of course, thank you. And there are no credible plans that you are putting forward that we can actually work with. So this is that through the chair, of course, through the chair. So yes, the budget. The budget is the economic plan. What we're discussing today is Bill C-15, which is our economic plan to deal with the current situation that is happening in our country with the tariff that we are going through, the unjustified tariff, right? The trade war that's happening, the cost of living, the housing crisis, right? And we are putting forward credible measures to deal with that, and yet you stand up and you vote no and no and no against Canadian, through you, the chair, every time of the day. So my question for you, Ms. Jumun, thank you very much again for being here. So can you explain to me to what extent the proposed amendment because we are proposing to, students that are attending schools outside of Canada. So how many students are we talking about that are attending for-profit schools of Canada that have a student loan that could be impacted by this? Do you have numbers on that?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. And again, wanted to highlight that my mandate, and I represent the public institutions here, but for me, as we are also having discussion about implementing of this act, there's also a current risk that is going to happen where if after July 2026 that we see no further commitment, because we didn't see it in budget 2025, of continuing the expansion in the Canada student grants and the loans, we will see a decrease in the number of students who will be accessing those programs and a cut to their support to continue post-secondary education. So again, this is not my area of expertise to speak on private institution. We do have the experts here. I am here to kind of talk a little bit about the risk that the value of the Canada Student Financial Aid is about to experience after July 2026.
Just in the budget, included in Bill C-15, there is the proposal to increase the Canada Summer Job, proposal to increase work on work-integrated learning, proposals to increase all of these to help with youth unemployment, to help students gain that meaningful first experience. So would you say those are helpful for students looking out to transition into the market?
Of course, thankful to see that there's so many opportunities that has increased. And again, I guess with time we will see the benefit of these. But again, if we are then creating barriers for students to even get into post-secondary, because as I've mentioned in my opening remarks, we did see an increase in groups who are underrepresented traditionally to go into post-secondary, accessing post-secondary education. We might have job opportunities during their post-secondary education, but if they are not able to even get their foot through the door and attend post-secondary, I think we will then continue experiencing student unemployment, where we will see that graduate student after high school will not be able to continue post-secondary education, and we will see an increase in unemployment outside of the post-secondary sector as well.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Jumun. Anything else you'd like to add?
Nope, that's it.
Thank you, Madame de Rocher. Madame LaRouche pour 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are here to talk about C-15, the Budget Implementation Act. In the first panel, we talked about the National School Food Program. And let us be clear, Mr. Chair, we had witnesses that were invited to talk about that topic, and we asked the Liberals in good faith to provide us the material we were going to study, because that's how committees work. But during the last committee meeting, I'll try to make this quick, Mr. Chair, and then I'll turn to the witnesses for questions. I was told that I had not provided my motion with the 48 hours of advance, which was not correct, which was not accurate. But today we ended up with a motion on our lap, and I just asked for the motion to be sent by email so that we could take the time to take a look and study it. So we did not oppose the subject globally. It was just a question of doing our job appropriately as parliamentarians, as rigorously as we should, so without being subject to attacks. So, with that being said, we're here to talk about the cost of living and affordable housing. Well, we have witnesses who are talking to us about this topic today. I'll turn to you, Ms. Jumun, if my pronunciation is correct. You were saying that with this measure, you would be, or at least there would be students who would contemplate leaving their studies because of the financial impact. You also talked about rent, among other things. So what's the impact of the measure that you are here to talk about, and that some students might need to drop out, return to the labor market? And we keep talking about affordable housing, but affordable housing might have many meanings. Is that an appropriate meaning for you, or is housing that's available really affordable? I'd like to hear you on these points. Thank you very much for the question. I'll answer your question in English, if that's okay.
The question, when we are speaking to students, actually we are currently tabling at our 26-member campuses across Canada, and what we hear from students is they are being told by employers that they need to go to post-secondary education, earn a credential, and then to be able to get into the workforce. But what they are currently experiencing is the high cost of living. As I've mentioned in my opening remarks, over the past year, we've seen that living expenses for students have increased by 71.1%. And currently, we are, again, as I've mentioned, after July 2026, there has not been any decision being made about whether the Canada Student Grant will continue being expanded or not. And I think that is leaving a lot of students in precarity. And this testament I've shared from the student is in the second year's program. So they've already invested 2 years into the program, and they will wake up in the summer of 2026 to find $1,200 less that they were expecting to get. And as I've mentioned, students are already facing a lot of barriers to that. So to answer your question, I think students are very much living into the precarity. And again, in terms of like longevity and long-term prospect as well, I think it is important to recognize that we are experiencing a decrease in enrollment in general with the international student policy change. And now is the time to encourage our domestic students to pursue post-secondary education, because they are the future. They will be the one building the country that we are saying we are going to build. But I think there is like a barrier here that is allowing people to go into post-secondary. And in terms of like your affordable housing, I know there are a lot of investment and a lot of projects happening in terms of that. But again, you need the people to be able to build those houses. That's why we push for apprenticeship. We need the students to go to colleges to get those certificates to be able to build those housing. So I think the main issue here that we are putting at risk is that we will see less and less students undertaking into our post-secondary system if they have a decrease in funding.
En effet, quand on parle de
You talked about projects, Build Canada Homes, for instance. There are some groups that have concerns about what exactly affordable means and what percentage of one's income needs to go into housing, because the more you put the bigger the percentage of your income you put into that, the less money you have to feed yourself. there are underrepresented groups, for instance, students with disabilities. What kinds of challenges will they face if this goes ahead, or how could they be supported furthermore?
When it comes to when we talk to students with disabilities, I think the number of costs that they end up living is a lot more than someone who's not living with disabilities when it comes to maintenance of their medication, maintenance of whatever their disability would be. So I think if we are categorizing them within the same student financial aid program, so that fund becomes a lot more important to them, and the $1,200 grant that they receive annually is in fact important to them. So I would say their cost of living is definitely way more higher than a student who might be living without disability as well.
Madame LaRouche? I just want to clarify to the committee, because we were scheduled to win camera at this time, but I have the time to continue with a second full round, being 5, 5, 2.5. So with that, Mr. Hu, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first set of questions are for Mr. Dylan Kirk at the Council of Traditional Chinese Medicine and Acupuncture School of Ontario. Could you describe how traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture students typically finance their education, and where grants fit into that picture?
Thank you so much. What we see in our sector is actually a lot of our students are coming maybe after a liberal arts degree or as a second career after trying something else. And that means that many of them may have families or other responsibilities. And what I experience in speaking with them is that that they are struggling, that they're, it's difficult to live in today's economic world and be dealing with all the other challenges of life, and then also being a full-time student in a intensive medical program. So the grant portion is very important, and one of the ways that we see it very tangibly is that the graduate is not burdened with huge sums of debt that takes them many years to get out of.
While we're on that point, so what percentage do you see approximately of students would rely on those federal grants?
I think we have somewhere around 80% in our college are getting financial aid, and the majority of them have some grant allocation. So,
so what participate on enrollment and the viability of all the programs that are part of your group if the Liberal government recklessly defunded these grants? Would you see enrollment go down?
I mean, what the grants, yeah, absolutely. Enrollment would go down. The access to the education, people do rely on those grants.
Yeah. So just a final question for you is, I guess, how would you describe the role that private career colleges play in filling gaps that are left by the public institutions that the Liberal government is just failing to see?
I mean, what I've observed is that public institutions are large organizations that take time to change and implement, and certain sectors like ours, the private colleges are able to step in and fill those roles. We can offer the education that's needed and make changes as necessary and meet students' needs for scheduling or access or location in a way that larger institutions cannot.
Thank you, Dylan. My next set of questions is for Ms. Mary Wu from the Toronto School of Traditional Chinese Medicine. Thank you for joining us. Can you speak to the level of demand that you see for professionals that are trained in traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture? Is the demand going up in recent years, or?
Yes, from our situation here, let's see, before the pandemic, right? And even before, let's see, the government student financial assistance were available, then we may have 6, 5, 10 students in each class. But with the financial assistance, recent years, let's see, for the past 3, 4, 5 years, our enrollment has significantly increased. Now we can get to about 30, 40 students in a class. So this is a huge difference. And with the proposed budget last year, actually, it disturbed our students tremendously already. Some of them are thinking about withdraw from the program already because they just say they simply won't be able to sustain and to continue their education. Some of them are saying, hey, I'm going to public college because I can continuously to get the government Canada student grant. Now, if you look at my speech, there is an appendix about the public institution versus private institutions. In Ontario, there are 16 educational institutions.
I'm running out of time. So do you see, with the Liberals recklessly defunding the financing of training of traditional Chinese medicine, would you see a reduction in new graduates which will ultimately affect service in your community?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, well,
it will seriously affect. It may even be detrimental for, students cannot get in. They may have to be steered to other majors, other post-secondary educations, or they just simply stop that. Some of our institutions may not even be able to survive.
Monsieur Joseph, pour 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Well, you know me. There are some things that I cannot just let go by. Our colleague, Mr. Janis, talked about diversity programs and systemic racism. It is nonsense, Mr. Chair. Now, to talk about housing, to build housing, we need to have the budget for it. As long as you don't adopt a budget, you cannot go ahead and build houses. Because the funding necessary for this effort, well, it's in the budget. Build Canada Homes needs the money. Now, because we are talking about students, my question will be for you. Can you tell us how can the Canadian Alliance of Student Associations assist in the implementation of policies, be it in healthcare or other areas via government programs for students? How can the government help you improve these programs? Thank you for the question. I'll answer in English, if that's okay.
Yes, in terms of how do we get our student association and the student leaders involved, again, I think when I see the student leaders that I work with on the regular basis, this is like a work integrated learning that they are also getting by being advocate on their campus. And again, I feel like I'm sounding like a broken record, but I think for me, my reason for being here is, again, highlighting that how in the budget of 2025, we didn't see a continuation in the expansion of Canada Student Grant and the loans as well. But we've seen an increase in inflation going forward. So what our students are genuinely asking for is to get that support and to see that continued support that has supported them since post-pandemic. We recognize that that measure was included in the pandemic to support the student, but we haven't seen a decrease in.
Vous parlez dans les budgets 2025 qu'il n'y a pas d'augmentation. Vous êtes
So you're saying there was no increase in the budget 2025, but if the budget isn't adopted, what happens? There won't be an increase if the budget is not adopted. So if the budget needs to pass, it needs to be adopted first. Well, I don't think that I am the best place to talk about the adoption of the budget, but the increase will end, or the program rather will end by July 2026, whether the budget passes or not. So students are really concerned about what would happen after July 2026. That is why I'm before the committee asking you to consider the longevity and the permanence of these programs and the investments, because each year students cannot make this decision, or if they cannot see whether they can continue their studies, it puts them in a tough spot. So it's about having permanent investment. Well, we these are, yes, recommendations we have coming from the students. We would like to see these programs made permanent. So I'll have another question for you. What measures should the government adopt to improve access to financial tools for students? And I haven't finished, sorry, because we know that some student populations are vulnerable. And if you know examples, if you can maybe talk about these. My colleague, Ms. LaRouche, talked about students experiencing or with disabilities or in vulnerable situations. Can you give us examples?
Again, I think the Canada student grants and the loan, as we've expressed, do end up benefiting a lot more of the low income, the student with disability, the Indigenous student to access post-secondary education. That's why we're asking a little bit more for the permanent investment. And in terms of like specific recommendation for these groups, of course, I'm happy to follow up in terms of what that would look like. But again, I think the education system that a lot of our students have said is when that is like their way to get out of their vulnerable groups that they've grew up in, and in terms of like the social mobility and getting accesses to these services. So for us, like the main concern that we currently have is how do we get the students in those institutions and to support them financially to get in those institutions.
C'est fini?
Minute. 10. Oh, ça compte.
Merci beaucoup. 10 minutes, là.
Oui. Merci, merci, Monsieur Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Joseph.
We, okay, committee members, my mistake, Mr. Joseph. Madame LaRouche pour 2 minutes et 30.
Microphone, please, inaudible for the interpreter.
Pardon, oui, merci, monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I asked an initial question to Ms. Jimun about the precarious situations students find themselves in with housing and getting themselves into a first home, for instance, as the years go by. So we're looking for solutions for them so that they can face the increasing cost of living and food. So, Mr. Kirk, you talked about the federal funding that's available. Do you have concrete examples? Maybe a student, what does this represent for students who might be in precarious situations? What's their reality and what are the risks they're facing in terms of getting poorer, essentially?
You may have a single mother with a child at home that is struggling to maintain her full-time education and childcare and cost of housing and cost of food. You know, all of this adds up. And I will just add that people from Indigenous communities or other communities, we've seen an increase of their ability to take these programs with the grants, and that has allowed them to access it.
Même, donc,
So, Ms. Wu, would you have an example for us? What could be done to improve the situation, the conditions of these students in precarious situations?
Well, in our situation here, many students are single mothers or low-income families there. In this case, they are so concerned about the cut. What we really like to ask the committee is that do not cut, do not reduce under this kind of hardships already, and do not increase the financial burden to our students at this time, and do not kind of make it unfair between the public students attending public institutions and the private institutions. We just like the government to be fair, if possible, to increase the funding for specially needed areas and the professions, such as traditional Chinese medicine. We have seen so many and heard so many successful stories that our graduates are able to help Canadians to improve their health and reduce their pains and aches and so on there. And most of our students actually come to study TCM is because they themselves are beneficiaries from the treatment of acupuncture and traditional Chinese medicine. They have the passion to help people. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Wu. Thank you. Merci, Madame LaRouche.
Thank you, Ms. LaRouche.
Would conclude the second hour of the committee's witness testimony. I would like to at this time thank the witness for appearing, and thank you, Mr. Kirk, for accommodating the committee in the second hour. With that, we're going to suspend while we transition to in-camera for a brief period of time. Suspend.
you.